is going on?
No matter how far you go into the dark, when you flip, you go exactly the same place to the light in our galaxy. Everything. Because everything is in balance. Everything is a polarity.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is.
What the hell is going on, everyone? Yes, we have sound. Hope you're all doing well. Happy Monday morning. I hope you've all got a nice recreational coffee ready to enjoy while we get through this show. It is all about disclosure and the fact that it seems like from multiple different angles, we are sort of converging on this point where we're talking about disclosure in the news. We're talking about it in these very overfunded documentaries. We're talking about them in podcasts, and we're getting people come out of the woodworks who have picked a very convenient time to come out and talk about disclosure, as well as in a lot in the podcast world as well. And that's basically what we're going to be looking at today. So we've got a whole bunch of different clips, all from different angles pointing towards the same thing. And it is an interesting time to be alive, that is for sure. T-Mad put in $5 before the stream even started and said, let's fucking go. Can't get enough polarity and we need it big time. Can feel the tension in the air, even in Melbourne at the moment. Love your work. It all resonates with me a lot. Thank you very much, bro. And yes, big tensions at the moment in Australia, but hopefully after yesterday, people are feeling a little bit better. I know, tensions were high yesterday. Hopefully things are settling down for people, and big love to everyone back home. Also, Astro Games, thank you very much for becoming a member. You little freak. Also, Bullfrog Tube, you are a freak as well. Thank you very much, guys. So I'm excited to get into today's show. I think we're going to be kicking it off with a clip from the age of, not from the age of disclosure. You don't want to do that because, you will get deleted off of YouTube with a copyright strike because when you're putting out a movie trying to get important information out into the world, the last thing you want is people covering it, right? I mean, when you want to disclose the truth, you don't want other people doing it. You don't want other people talking about it too. You only want your documentary to say it. That costs $40 after you pay for your Amazon subscription. So it all makes sense, doesn't it? Let's jump over to the Polarity TV. Oh, look, just quickly as well, I will say Merry Christmas, everyone. There is 20% off in the Polarity merch store right here. That is applying to all t-shirts, hats, t-shirts, hoodies. I think just clothes. I don't know. I can't remember. I'm sorry, but you get 20% off. Merry Christmas. Go and enjoy it. Here's some of our merch right here. The link is below. Anyway, let's get on with the show. We're going to start off with a clip from Marco Rubio talking about his time and his segment in the Age of Disclosure documentary. And this is really interesting. Obviously, Marco Rubio is probably the most senior person to, I think you could say that, probably the most senior person to speak on the topic in the documentary. And this is a really interesting clip here because it kind of feels like he's backpedaling on his statements a little bit. Let's check this out.
There's a show that's come out. It's called The Age of Disclosure.
Yeah.
Okay, I know everyone probably, right? Everyone asks you about it?
Sure.
It's a new documentary. We had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities. It's not ours, and presidents operate on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah.
Okay, that is...
So a couple points on it. First of all, I'm not disavowing that. That was an interview that was done almost maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was in the Senate.
Right.
So
already heading backwards.
It wasn't recent. The second point I would make, I was describing the allegations that people have come forward with. I have people that came forward to us. Some of these people were Navy pilots, admirals, generals, whatever, that would come forward and say that there were programs in the U.S. government that not even presidents were made aware of. So I was describing what people had said to me, not things that I have firsthand knowledge of in that regard. A little bit of selective editing, but it's okay because, you're trying to sell a show there. But
I mean, he's like backpedaling hard, a little bit of selective editing, but that's okay. He sounds like me.
The fundamental comments, I haven't seen it, but the clips I've seen and people have shown me are fundamentally true, and that is there are things, we know this has been documented, there have been things that fly over the airspace, restricted airspace, be it where we're conducting military exercises or the like, and everyone in the government says they're not ours. And so what I worry most about, just me personally, is that some adversary, another country, for example, has developed some asymmetric capability for surveillance or the like that we just are not prepared for. we're looking for missiles and fighter jets, and they're coming at us with drones and balloons. I remember, when NORAD turned on the radars and started looking for balloons, all of a sudden they spotted a bunch of balloons flying overhead, and 90% of them were innocent, things. A couple of them were Chinese. And so, but we never look for balloons because our radars aren't trained for that. So that really was the point I was trying to drive at. I can't comment on the rest of the documentary. It has, as I said, claims from people that were former admirals, naval fighters, people with high clearances in government. Some of them are pretty spectacular claims. I'm not calling these people liars. I don't have independent knowledge that what they're saying is true. The one observation I had is we had people that did very important jobs in the US government who are saying these things. So we have people with very high jobs in the US government that are either A, liars, B, crazy, or C, telling the truth. And two of those three options are not good. But I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I don't have any point of, I don't want to call them liars. I just don't have any independent way to verify everything they said.
Kind of weird, right? I mean, it feels like he's really distancing himself from what the documentary is meant to be about, right? The documentary is meant to be about the fact that, well, I mean, what is that documentary meant to be about? It depends. It probably depends how deep you are in the topic on how you feel about that, to be honest. But I think the surface level on what the documentary is meant to be about is that there is something unidentified in the sky and that it might be a threat, okay? That's what it feels like it's meant to be about, but it leans into the idea that it's like a form of non-human intelligence. At least that's what it wants you to believe, that a form of non-human intelligence is a threat. Marco Rubio is here basically trying to flip that, it feels like, and say that it is balloons and drones and foreign adversaries, balloons and drones. Now, that might be true. That might be true. So, who knows? But the one thing I do want to say is that if anyone would know if anyone would hear what's going on, it would be Marco Rubio. Like, if anyone's going to hear about it, it's the guy with radars plugged onto each side of his head. Sorry, that was probably a little bit unnecessary, but I feel like it had to be. I do feel like it had to be said. What concerns me the most about all of this is the fact that you have the Secretary of State, again, one of the most senior people in the government, who seems like they don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, to me, it's like they're trying to make the most pressing issue the fact that, like, there is like a non-human threat. There is, something here. But the fact that the Secretary of State is like, we're not really sure. We don't know if these are balloons or drones. It's like, bro, you should know. If anyone should know, it should be you. And specifically you, Marco, you should definitely be able to hear what's going on from a mile away. I don't think you could whisper a secret within a kilometer range of this man without him hearing it. That's what I think. Most of them are in the dark. Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I do think that. And I actually think that is that's the biggest threat. That is the biggest threat. Not the fact that there are things in the sky. The fact that it seems like elements of the government, high levels of the government, seem to genuinely have no idea. Please, bro, stop Rubio simping. Jack, brother, I don't know if you're lost. I've literally just been roasting him here for having big ears for 5 minutes. So I don't know where you're coming from. But please, take a seat, take a deep breath, get yourself a glass of water, and join the group. Either way, it's a surveillance state. Yeah, well, maybe the thing is, I feel like the surveillance is inward when it should probably be outward. Not Rubio is the one to say, no, we won't tell Trump yet, so he has plausible deniability because it could be James again. No, look, I think James... Look, I don't even know what that kid is up to these days. I have not kept up with that story. However, I do not think James is involved in this. I think we can confidently say that. Dan says, I think he got compromised or threatened due to his interest in the topic, and that's how he got in such a high position because he complied. Look, that's an interesting point. And it would make sense with the fact that, he said he gave this interview, what, three years ago, I think he said, which is kind of crazy that these interviews happened 3 years ago for this movie. And it does line up with the fact that, like, you know, so many of the people that were like tipped to become part of the Trump administration, and even like Trump himself, right? Like, I don't know what this means, but, you know, they campaigned on the Epstein files. They talked about like all this transparency and all this kind of stuff. And then when they got in, they then just appeared on camera and were like, there's no evidence to suggest that there is any Epstein files at all. In fact, who's Epstein? I've never heard of the guy. You sort of seem a little compromised. Something just seems a little off. It could be the fact that it looks like your eyes are popping out of your head, or the fact that you've just completely 180'd on everything you campaigned on. I don't know. Maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist. But anyway, let's get to a few other clips from another sus avenue known as News Nation. Jump over here. A little bit less sus, though. You know, I'm a little bit more partial to Tim Burchett. Let's have a listen to what he has to say here. So this is talking about USOs, and shout out to Red Panda for the clip. Representative Tim Burchett on U.S. Navy officials that told him about 5 to 6 underwater USO and UAP bases, and they belong to non-human intelligence. And that part I do find interesting because, you know, the idea that there are bases under the ocean and in the mountains is not just an age of disclosure News Nation psyop. Like, this is coming from people on all tiers, on like experiences, people who are labeled absolute nusses, right up to people who are working as lawyers for some of these people. So here we go.
You've speculated about 5 or 6 bases of non-human entities. Where did you get that number from?
From some Navy officials that had, in fact, had broached that subject to me. I always remember the last thing this one fellow said, because you've been in my office, but you come in one door and you can go out the other if you choose. And nobody ever does. They just go out the entrance they came up. He chose to go out the other door so he could kind of get away from all the other. And the last thing he said was, he looked at me and said, "Tim, they're real." And I'll never forget that. And I you know, it led me to believe that he had more information.
And to be very clear about this, Tim, what you're saying is that these objects underwater, these bases underwater, they are non-human. You're clear about that?
That would be my belief, yes, sir. Again, we don't have the capabilities of traveling there or doing anything else.
Clearly, something is operating in our oceans very close to the continental United States. And as you've speculated, it's perhaps using it for some kind of surveillance.
100%. That's the only reason that would be doing it. When the numbers go up and then they drop off to almost nothing, and then you have these clusters that occur, and that would lead you obviously to believe that something is observing us, or we're observing something and we're observing them. But I guess it still just bothers me that our government won't come forward with it, because and the guys on the intelligence committee. I think, and gals, I think you have a few in there that just wanted to dissuade us from finding out what the real truth is.
The idea that something is surveilling, that, what did he say? That it's surveilling us and we're surveilling them. I mean, it would make sense, right? It would make sense that if we are detecting all of these, well, first of all, it would make sense that the ocean, if something has advanced technology, especially if we're talking about like manipulating gravity, if something has the technology to do that, obviously the ocean would be the best place to live alongside human beings and be also like protected from them at the same time. Because we are so incompatible with the ocean, it's crazy. Like, not even the fact that we can't breathe in it, but like once you go beyond like, I don't know, what is it, like 8 meters, it starts feeling like your head is going to cave in. And the deeper you go, the worse that gets. So, and also, I would probably say that and maybe you guys can say that I'm wrong here and correct me, but I would say that the most intelligent life that we can observe that lives on this planet is probably marine life. Are there any, like, and I'm talking about like octopus, dolphins, these kind of animals display like crazy intelligence. Is there anything else on land other than humans that kind of matches that? I feel like maybe you could say like some birds are pretty intelligent, but I feel like it's not the same level as marine life. Dan says elephants. I think some other land animals are intelligent, like notably intelligent. But I do feel like, when it comes to, because like let's use the octopus for an example. It's not just the fact that they seem to be able to like problem solve and have a level of like sentient intelligence, but then they also have this like wild capability to like completely, I mean, we could maybe use the term shapeshift loosely. Like they can fit themselves through tiny holes, and then they can completely change the color and almost like texture of their skin. It's kind of crazy what they can do. I feel like because it's an octopus and we sort of, we all know the octopus. We all like agree that a species called the octopus lives here, because we're like desensitized to that idea. We almost see what it does, and it's just like, oh yeah, that's just an octopus. They're crazy. But if like we saw, say, something that looked more like a crocodile that was like 7 foot tall, standing like a humanoid, do that, we would be like, oh my God, it's a shape-shifting reptilian. Do you know what I mean? But it's kind of displaying the same abilities. But it's almost the same thing, but a little bit different. But you get where I'm coming from here. Like octopus kind of display superhuman abilities in a way. Yowies shapeshift or disappear right in front of your eyes. Yowies basically just like a Bigfoot, right? It's the same kind of thing. I don't know about Bigfoot. I always feel like digging into the, the conspiracy realm, I've always been a little bit like hesitant about the idea of Bigfoot. However, the more I get into it, the more I'm like, you know what? There might actually be something to that. And like the whole idea of cryptids. And I feel like it's, if any, but I don't think it's just like some lost ape species that is really elusive. I feel like it's probably something along the idea of being like, I don't know, something interdimensional, something that is related to the idea that some places around the world, the veil seems to be a bit thinner, like where like the ley lines, things like that, where things seem to perhaps like phase in and out of reality, Skinwalker Ranch, etc., etc. If Bigfoot is real, I think it's something like that, but I really have no idea. Bigfoot has a link to the phenomenon. Yeah, exactly. That's my line of thinking too. The Vern Dude with $5 says, showing love, bro. My man, Vern Dude. Merry Christmas, brother. Sailor Boy Troy, also with a $5, says, I said it in the group before. The lights in the poster look like the Pleiades constellation. Are you referring to the Disclosure poster? Interesting, brother. We're going to get into that very soon. I think we've got one more clip, and then we're going to jump into the Steven Spielberg movie. And Zach Beach, my man, is back again, gifting 5 memberships. Zach, thank you very much, bro. Let's get some love in the chat for Zach and the 5 new members. And Merry Christmas to you all. Okay. One more News Nation clip here. Actually, sorry, we've got 2 more clips. One more from News Nation, though. And everyone's best mate, Mr. Lou Elizondo. Oh, my God. Please stop.
The Trump administration, Donald Trump.
Okay. It doesn't want to pause for some reason.
Do you think
okay, we're just going to play it then.
The Trump administration, Donald Trump, is thinking about disclosure?
Well, I hear what you hear and everybody else, that he's contemplating it, that he's been told about it. But I also want to be realistic here. Yes, there's a tremendous opportunity here for our president to be the first sitting president to say, yes, this is real and this is a problem. But there's also a tremendous amount of risk, because if it turns out that there is some sort of foreign adversarial involvement behind this, there's some sort of new type of stealth reconnaissance capability, let's say that country X developed or something like that, and we go out on a limb and say that these things are all because of this, and it turns out they're actually because of that, then that's a risk as well, and that can actually be used to discredit you and to hurt your efforts. So the president, all presidents, have to be, and this is why they have so many advisors. They have to weigh the pros and cons of what they say publicly. Now, this particular president, I think most people can agree, whether you agree with his politics or not. He is not afraid to say what he feels, and so from that perspective, I think it's very refreshing. I think all presidents should say how they feel. The question is, what does he actually feel about this topic? Sometimes when he's been asked in the past, he has said, I personally don't believe it. I don't think there's much to see there. And other times he's turned around and said, actually, you know what? I've received some briefings. Pretty interesting. We should take it seriously. But again, that's a question you would need to ask to the president himself. I certainly would not want to be in any type of position to presume what our president, Donald Trump, knows about this topic.
Interesting. James Smith says he looks like he dipped his chin in a bubble bath. Some fantastic analysis there from James. Very good, sir. I appreciate it. What I find interesting here is the fact that it seems like, on one hand, Lou Elizondo, and I'm not really just talking about Lou here. I'm kind of talking about this like sort of CIA-led disclosure group, right? It seems like on one hand they're saying that there is a threat and that we all should be prepared for something imminent, etc. And then at the same time, they also kind of come out and say, but we're really not sure what it is. Like, it could be, we could say it's X, but it's actually Y. Or we say it's Y, but it's actually Z. I mean, the phenomenon is obviously something that's hard to wrap your head around, right? But it doesn't really feel like that's what they're getting at. It feels like what they're saying is, it feels like they're trying to mix it in with the idea that it could be China or it could be Russia. Like, do you guys get the same idea from that? Because I don't think they're trying to say, oh, we don't want to say it's angels, or we don't want to say it's aliens when it could be angels and demons or whatever. It could be a poltergeist. You know what I mean? I feel like there's the whole of like getting it mixed up within the phenomenon itself. But I don't feel like that's what they're getting at here. I think they're trying to say, oh, we don't want to say it's aliens because it could be China. It could be Russia. Yes. Trying to play the blame game, deflection. Yes, for military funding, exactly. And I think that's like the big worry here, is that that as we've been told, it feels like it could be like as we've been told, like a last card, like a final false flag on an alien threat to propagate a war machine. But honestly, like, that is a great pause face on Ross, which I didn't even do this time. Normally it's me, this time it isn't. That is like the one big thing that just worries me with this topic. And we've looked at Chase Hughes, who talks a lot about psychological operations and like how to know that you're in one. And he recently did a podcast where the interviewer said, how would you know, like, what's the best way to know if you're in a psychological operation? And he basically just turned around and said, honestly, I would just assume that I'm always in one, which is kind of crazy. But one of the key things that he has said is that when all different media outlets, and that doesn't just mean news, by the way, when all different media outlets begin to converge on a topic and everyone kind of starts reporting on something at the same time. Now, that's, again, kind of what this show is about. Now, I'm not saying like the whole topic is a psyop, because you guys know I very much do believe that reality is vastly different and more complex than we've been led to believe. But I also feel like when everyone suddenly is pro-disclosure, and I don't mean people, I mean, the news, the government, the military, when suddenly it's okay to talk about this stuff and you're no longer just a tinfoil hat lunatic for even entertaining the idea, when suddenly it's okay to talk about it and suddenly they want you to know, it feels sus, because these are the same people that have made you basically gaslit you into thinking you're a lunatic for even entertaining the idea for 80 years. And that's okay, because you could say, hey, maybe they've decided that what they did was wrong, and maybe they've decided they want to tell us. And hopefully that is the case. But until you actually take accountability and admit the previous 80 years, it's hard to believe you, because it's just like the boy who cried wolf, right? it feels like this is just propagating the psyop. So I think we'll jump over to one more clip, actually, before we get to the Disclosure movie poster, which I'm really looking forward to dissecting. We've got a little weave to go through here. Just before we do, though, excuse me, Frazzle Dazzle 89 says, check out Scott Carpenter, Evidence Denied, DNA study of Bigfoot. It's human hybrid. Also, David Paulides has just released on a documentary on Bigfoot. Okay, interesting. Chuck it in the Discord. That is where I sort of source most of my information. Thank you very much, sir. And Michael Frost says, hey, mate, did you see the Bondi shooter's name was Googled 12 times into Israel before the shooting took place again? Love your work. I did see that. Yeah. If you look on Google Trends, the shooter's name was Googled, like there was like a spike in that name being Googled in Tel Aviv, Israel, like, I don't know, like within 24 hours before the shooting actually took place, which is kind of random. And I'm pretty sure you can just like go look that up yourself on Google Trends. Weird. I don't know what that means. But yeah, maybe you can figure it out for yourself. All right, let's go to, I think we need to jump over to the Polarity.
Come out. It's called
Get out of here, Marco. I know you're listening to my secrets wherever you are in the world. Okay, this is Jeff Nuccatelli, former whistleblower and testimony at the last UAP hearing. This is a clip from that UFO podcast.
The third thing, my prediction is you're going to see heroes fall. The celebrities, the thought leaders in this space, the people that are out there claiming to be doing the work, taking the credit, getting the glory, shaping the narrative, you're going to see those people fall flat on their face. And that's going to be disruptive to the community, to the movement, to everything, because there are bad actors out there. And there is in my opinion, I can't prove this, but the Fed has actively infiltrated the podcasting space. I put this out publicly a few months ago. Kurt Jai-Mungal, who I'm a fan of, put a tweet out a few months ago and said, hey, what's going on in UFO world? And I said, here's what's going on. The FBI is infiltrating the podcast space.
So if you want to watch this full podcast, it is linked below, of course. Interesting, right? For a couple of reasons. The first one is, first of all, for people to fall flat on their face, right? I mean, the idea that there are bad actors, spreading disinformation in the UFO space is not a foreign concept. But the idea that Jeff is saying people are going to fall flat on their face, that means, like, for that to happen, the truth has to come out, right? Like you have to have some form of disclosure. For the act of the bad actors to actually be exposed, there has to be some kind of disclosure to come first. So that's just like an interesting take from that I find. He's basically saying, like is the theme of the show, that something is coming soon that is going to expose all of this, which, has to be some form of disclosure, right? For that to happen. But it's also interesting to hear someone of this caliber, someone who's testified in front of Congress, someone who's probably been in a lot of interesting circles and spoken to a lot of interesting people, to be saying that there are bad actors on the podcast circuit specifically that are going to be exposed. Who do you guys think that could be? Because, I think Kelly Chase, famous spoon bender, actually spoke about this, her experience of this as well, that people in these spaces, invite you into signal chats, invite you into these sort of like, private groups in a way of like giving you inside information and all this kind of shit. And then if you start to not kind of toe the line, or if you don't sort of report on the things they want you to report on, or if you report on other things that they don't want you to report on, then it starts to kind of get a little nasty. And Kelly Chase isn't the only one to talk about this, by the way. And, I've been invited to signal groups and these kind of things. And sometimes I've joined them. I'm never really active in them. I can't even remember the last time I opened Signal, to be honest. But honestly, I try to just fly with blinkers on. And sometimes that's probably to my detriment, but I personally feel like it's more to my benefit overall, because I try to just stay in my own lane, follow my own sort of like intuition with what feels right. And I might not always be right, by the way, and I think that's important to say. But I also feel like I would rather just stick to my own gut rather than allow myself to be influenced by someone else who may not always necessarily be nefarious, by the way. Like, I'm not saying everyone who tries to talk to me has a bad intention, because I've actually made some really cool friends in this space and I'm really grateful for them. But I also think I don't feel the need to like be inside people's circles and stuff like that, because I don't know, at the end of the day, I don't know you. You know what I mean? I'm happy to be acquaintances, but the idea of like being in secret little chats with like, you know, names that you've heard of, I feel like people try to use that to maybe like bring, you know, like dangle the carrot a little bit. Like, I'm not a fan of people who like use names and stuff to like dangle the carrot, like name droppers, and like try and bring you in. To me, that's just like ultimate red flag. Like, I'm not interested, bro. Really not interested. And by the way, look, this is about nobody in particular, because there's multiple people. And again, none of them at all may even necessarily be nefarious. And I could just be literally a paranoid idiot. But I just feel like it's safer to be that way. And then you can just kind of navigate this space on your own, rather than being like, wait, do you have an ulterior motive? You know what I mean? And let's be honest, like, this space, as Jeff just said, is full of people. And look, if you were, I'll be honest with you guys, okay? I'm that paranoid that, like, if a girl tries to message me on Instagram who is like even just mildly attractive, I'm like, what are you, a fucking honeypot CIA? Like, who do you work for? And I'm serious. Like, it's just like, what have you fucking profiled me? Not into it. Who do you fucking work for, girl? Toxic Fart says $5 from my cousin, Silent but Deadly. He's a retired ninja. Toxic Fart, I knew you would be related to Silent but Deadly. I had a feeling. Bleak says, I think Lou smells like cigars and jet fuel. You know what? I think you might be right. Definitely cigars. Fly Ether. Love, peace, and blessings to our Aussie brothers and sisters. Stand strong, and remember, those creating this chaos want us divided and at each other's throats. My man Fly Ether, everybody. Lord of the Clips and the Flies. Thank you very much, brother. Couldn't have said it better myself. 420 Breezy says, what's good, y'all? My man, shout out to you and the cat. Merry Christmas. Dusty G with $49.99. A big $50. Thank you very much, Dusty. A long-time supporter of the channel. Just threw in the little ninja sticker. I appreciate you, bro, and Merry Christmas to you and your family. And Aaron Clark says, thanks for another USA time zone friendly live stream. Of course, bro. Of course. It is a little bit easier for me to do that now in Bali. It's great. We can spread the love around, and that's what we need. That's what we need right now. All right, let's get on to...
Eventually people are going to say, what?
Not the end of the show. Not yet. Don't worry. It's not over yet. We are going to get into the disclosure poster. And I'm excited for this one for a couple of reasons. First of all, I mean, this poster is interesting. We just had someone mention in the chat that this looks like the Pleiades star cluster in the eyes of this thing. Now, I'm not familiar, so I can't really comment on that. But it is interesting. The poster says all will be disclosed. Spielberg, the 6th of the 12th, which is in freedom units. That's not the 6th of December. That is the 12th of June in 2026, which is close. That's in 6 months. Pretty much. No, it is. Almost to the day. No, wait, 7 months. 7 months. Relax. 7 months. And I believe this is Times Square, this photo. If this photo isn't Times Square, I know this poster is up in Times Square. But, I mean, super interesting poster. Looks like an alien gray, right? But with a very human looking eye, but very much a gray head. Now, when we compare it to this, which is the same image flipped upside down and then flipped vertically, it looks like a human eye. Okay? Now, we're going to keep cooking on this, so stay with me. Stay with me, ladies and gentlemen. And let me just get this underneath. There we go. So on this side, you've got what looks like a gray eye, and on this side, you've got what looks like a human eye. We can make these a little bit bigger. We want to get this broth tasty. You know what I mean? Actually, this would make more sense if we went this way. And if we did this. Sorry, we do this live. Now you see what I'm saying. Now you see what I'm saying a little bit better. In the context of like where we're at with things, what like, and when I say that, I'm talking about, you know, human hybrids, the fact that the phenomenon may be humans from the future coming back to like alter timelines. This is super, super interesting because it feels like this movie is going to have something to do. And look, I'm speculating here. I could be totally wrong. But it feels like this movie is going to have something to do with the concept that like they are us or we are them or we are related to them. They are us from another timeline, from the future, or something like this. And this is the premise of the book by Michael Masters, The Extratempestrial Model, that what the phenomenon is it is us from the future having some kind of effect on present time. And that's, you know, I think when we say that, we kind of think, oh, what is us coming back in like time machines? And maybe, I feel like that's really hard to wrap your head around. But what is maybe a little easier to wrap your head around is the fact that like time isn't linear and that we sometimes are able to kind of send messages to ourselves from the future. And this was spoken about recently in a show that we covered by Chris Ramsey of Area 52, who had an experience doing this himself, which saved his life. And it's also documented brilliantly in the movie Interstellar. And that, like, this might be a real thing. This might be a real thing, that we are able to kind of affect the present from the future because time isn't linear, which is a concept that is not new. And yes, the block universe theory, right? That all points in time exist. I think the block universe kind of gets explained almost like a loaf of bread. And that, you know, you got the past, the present at each end of the loaf, and we are just a slice in the middle, but the whole loaf exists right now, but we are just in one slice, which, you know, it's hard to conceptualize because it's like, you know, you're trying to ask something that is 3D to perceive 4 and 5D. Like you just can't. Just like if you are a dot in 1D, you can't perceive the length of the line that you might be at the end of as that dot, because that line is the second dimension. You can't see it, you can't perceive it because it's above your dimension. These are concepts that are a little bit brain melting. I totally understand that, but you know, I think it makes sense. So let's keep these in mind for now. And I'm gonna the reason why I think this is significant is because I think personally, Steven Spielberg knows things. Now, how deep that runs, like, is Spielberg a Majestic 12 member? Is Spielberg just read into things? Is Spielberg just given very limited pieces of information to build his movies around? And he actually doesn't know shit, but someone gives him little nuggets to put into his movies to seep these ideas into the public. I don't know. But I think something is true there. Like either one of those is true to some degree, okay? And this is why. Let me just bring this up here. Okay. This is, can you guys also, yeah, you guys can kind of see this. Okay. Let me go here. So this is today's schizophrenic mood board, and we've got a few more to go. This is everything that you see outlined in red is a Steven Spielberg depiction of a non-human being. Okay. The one on the very left and on the right-hand side at the top is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And then obviously below that one on the right is E.T. So let's just look at the very right-hand side of the screen. You've got the Nazca mummies, okay, found in Peru. And by the way, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977. E.T., I believe, was like 1982. And we're just kind of hearing about the Nazca mummies, in the last couple of years today, in the 2020s. So if we look here, this one, I mean, the one at the very top, if we go right to the top there, we've all probably seen this comparison a lot, right? That's pretty bang on. Very similar looking, like the neck, the jawline, the eyes, the eye sockets, the general structure of the head. Like that's almost identical. But we've seen that one a lot. What I find interesting is this Nazca mummy, because there are a few different types. I believe this one actually gets referred to as like the reptile one, which is like a pretty interesting choice of words. I might be wrong there, but this is its own class that is like defined as being kind of different to the one above it and the one that is on the very end of the screen that way, which we'll get to in a moment. But this one to me looks, sorry, I'm all over the place with my mirroring screen. This one looks so much like E.T., in my opinion. Then you've got, again, the other one in Close Encounters that looks like the one in the bottom left, which also looks like the Jonathan Reed case, which is a 1996 case of a guy who allegedly encountered an alien, which a lot of people think was debunked, which is okay. It's okay that you think that. And there is definitely an element of that case that is extremely strange, that feels fake. But I also think there is an element to the case that feels kind of real too. So, I like to include it. And the reason why I like to include it is because it happened in 1996, the same year as the Virginia case. And both of the beings have this brown skin that you can see there on the left-hand side with red eyes. So the illustrations in the middle are from, the middle illustration and the bottom one is from the Virginia case with the red eyes. The one at the very top is from the Rua, Zimbabwe case, which was a couple of years earlier, which children drew of a being that they saw appear next to their school. But the photos just over on the left there, in between the Close Encounters, are of the Jonathan Reed alien, which I just find fascinating. That in 1996, this isn't necessarily pre-internet, but it's pre everyone having the internet in their home, everyone having an iPhone. It's kind of pre everyone being so connected that information would spread so quickly, especially about a topic like this in 1996. And I just find it really interesting that not only does the being have this black, tight, wetsuit-like thing that so many of them seem to have in all of these encounters, including the one in Rua, Zimbabwe there, but it also has red eyes and brown skin, which is, exactly like the Virginia case. So I just find it interesting that there is so many similarities in these cases, and one of them was depicted in 1977 in a movie that was meant to just be fiction, right? Which in the modern day, we hear that the intelligence agencies often put truth in fiction, not even necessarily to leak the truth out, but to make it so if people do discover the truth, they are easily dismissed as just watching too many movies. It is like the perfect disinformation tactic. This is another one that I find interesting from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So on the left there, you see the scene from the movie highlighted in red, where there is like this UFO sort of, not necessarily an abduction scene, but an encounter where this guy's car basically gets interfered with, the electronics go crazy, the car stops working, all of like these common themes that we hear. The car starts like shaking and getting rattled while there's this like interaction with this light beaming down over the car, and this kind of like smoggy smoke starts to like appear as well. And the guy gets this, as you can see, like severe sunburn and radiation burn. And what you can see here on the right-hand side is the Knowles family incident that happened in 1988 in just next to South Australia and it was in Western Australia, just on the border of South Australia in Mundrabilla. And the same thing basically happened to this family, where this light descended on this car, and they claimed the car was lifted off the ground. It was slammed back on the ground while they were going like apparently nearly 200 Ks an hour. It popped a tire, and it left all of this weird like residue all over that car. And all of the family members had, like, it's hard to see in this picture, but in this interview, a lot of the family members had this like reddish hue to their skin, like they had had some kind of burn happen. It's not as severe and pronounced as you can see in the Close Encounters movie, but between the encounter, the details of the encounter itself, and the physical evidence left on the people, there are a lot of similarities there. And again, the movie came out in 1977. This happened in 1988. Coincidence? I don't know, perhaps. But at some point, kind of feels like there is a lot of coincidences happening. This is just another little thing in the movie that I think is interesting, and that is the fact that you see like a nod to the military-industrial complex that seems to be involved with handling this issue, and that is crates that are labeled Lockheed, which we know is just one of many defense contractors involved with this topic. And in fact, at one of the UAP hearings, we heard that, I believe, I can't remember which way it went. I'm struggling to think of it right now. But Lockheed was involved in the transfer of a recovered non-human craft. It was either from Lockheed to someone else, or Lockheed was going to receive it. No, I'm pretty sure it was from Lockheed to like the Air Force, or something a little bit more public access. And it was blocked by the CIA. Again, this is 1977. I think Josh is in deep in too many rabbit holes. There is facts that need explanation, but this isn't it. So, this isn't it. So it's okay if you do. Do you think that it's just a coincidence that like Lockheed are on these crates, that you see like radiation and burns happen almost 15 years prior to radiation and burns happening to a family that has the same kind of thing happen to their car? And then they also depict aliens almost exactly as they seem to be depicted in the modern day. You are absolutely welcome to your opinion if you believe that is a coincidence. But I just think there's just too many. There's too much there. There's too much there, in my opinion. Brad says, no, they don't think anything. You might be correct, Brad. You might be correct. And what about this one? Do you think this is a coincidence as well? So shout out to Mark for bringing this to my attention. So we looked pretty thoroughly, right, at the disclosure poster here, and we might actually bring this up in full. Make it a little bit bigger for the people. Okay, let's just put this here. So we've got the disclosure poster, and then we have probably one of the most famous crop circles ever to appear in 2002. Looks a little, I don't know. Is that the same picture? What do you guys think? Now, someone else, again, another sort of synchronicity to this topic of things all coming out at the same time is Area 52 just did a huge 4-hour podcast with a military man who had previously come out and spoken to Linda Moulton Howe almost a decade ago. But he came out anonymously back then, and he has now come out with his face, putting his face out there, which is interesting, right? Why did he feel compelled to do this now? Now, I mean, if you listen to his story, and I actually, it's so big and there's just so much in that I want to cover that in its own video, and I'm probably going to do that this week. There's so much there, but I feel like I don't necessarily think him coming out now is like it's a psyop, right? Everything's coordinated. If you listen to his story, and if it's true, because it is wild, but if it's true, he seems to be being compelled, or maybe like manipulated is a better word, but not necessarily in a sinister sense. Not necessarily in a sinister sense. He seems to be compelled or manipulated to be conveying these messages at this time. So it might actually just be more of that. He may have been compelled to bring his face out because something is coordinating this push to bring this out right now. And just on that, you guys might remember that we covered a phone call that happened between Kit Green and remote viewer Kay Randall May earlier in the year. Not that long ago, though. And that whole conversation was about the idea that there is a species here in the ocean, by the way, in the ocean, that is preparing humans for contact, and they are doing it through humans. And that some of these humans are going to feel compelled to do things that they wouldn't normally do, and they may not even know why they are doing them. And that this non-human intelligence is able to manipulate the human mind, which is something that we hear all the time. You hear this all the time through different experiences with the phenomenon in various ways. People like abductees, people who have just had like a close encounter, and then even people like Kyle Odom, who claims that he has seen someone shapeshift, and he details that they are able to manipulate our perception, not just on in a mental capacity, but in like a visual capacity too. That through like our bodies being made up of essentially like an electrical current. Our central nervous system runs on like an electrical current that is like, I guess, initiated by our heart. That's how we live. That electricity can be manipulated through waves. And that if you can control those waves, you can literally manipulate the human experience. And that is how they're able to do this. This is just what Kyle Odom's manifesto says, right? And it does actually, I mean, as schizophrenic as that manifesto may be on some levels, and, you know, I do kind of agree with that, but also I then kind of think, but, you know, what actually is schizophrenia? I do think there is a problem, but I do think that, you know, maybe people are tapping into something that everyone else is just behind the curve on. I mean, we know throughout history, a lot of the time, the people who were breaking ground, the most intelligent, and were able to kind of see things that most people weren't, as like a visionary, were seen as like heretical until everyone else was able to catch up, right? We've all seen that bell curve graph of intelligence, right? You've got like the absolute just like troglodytes at the back, then you've got the majority of the population, and then you've got an equal amount of like vastly intelligent people at the front, probably equal to the amount of troglodytes, but the vast majority of the population thinks both of them are just retarded. But actually, half of them are hyper intelligent and are actually way ahead of the rest of the population. But because they don't conform to mainstream society and the general consensus of how we perceive the world, they're just lumped in with the troglodytes. They were also seen as shamans historically, often called the touched ones. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And you often see those memes, right? That like shamans are like a lot of the people these days who are like medicated or just lumped in with being like a psycho would have actually been like the shamans and the leaders in like in like the native cultures, right? Troglodyte is such a fun word. It is a great one. It is. The more I look at the picture on the right now, it looks like a white mockingbird. So interestingly about this picture on the right, so this is binary code that you can see here in this circular part here. And just touching back on Chris's story that he broke the other day, which you should definitely check out if you haven't. It's a long one, so strap in. You know, a lot of the whistleblowers' messages came through binary. A lot of them. That he was basically, what's it called? Like subconscious writing. I don't know if that's the right word for it. Something, you know, when you're just compelled to write, and he's just creating these binary messages that are then decoded into these messages that are all along the lines of, like, beware of, be careful of AI. Humanity needs to save itself. Like, humanity needs to evolve for self-preservation of the planet. Um, and that is the same thing that is in this message here, which came in 2002. Automatic writing. Yes, thank you very much. This crop circle happened in 2002, and all of the messages that came through this whistleblower on Area 52 were well after this, which is interesting. And this crop circle, this binary message here says something along the lines of beware of the bearers of false gifts. Like, humanity is in danger, but there is still time. So something like that. Something like that. So it's interesting. Many, many things seem to be telling a similar story. And okay, I'm glad I remembered this, because this is one last point that I really wanted to touch on. Yeah, and Colleen, we're tapped in. We're tapped in, Colleen. After we recently spoke about Chris's story the other day, where he basically, had a moment where he narrowly avoided losing his life in a car crash, and he did that by just having this sudden urge to move into the back seat. That's something that he would never ever normally do. He just had this feeling. And then, decade later in life, when he was meditating, doing the Monroe Institute, he suddenly found himself like watching that scenario play out from like a bird's eye view. Okay, he was watching himself in the car and remembering that, this is that time I got into that car crash when I was younger. And then remembering that he got into the back seat, but he was watching himself and wondering, like, why aren't I getting in the back seat? Like, this is the time that I did that. Like, I should be getting in the back seat. And then it kind of clicked on him. It kind of clicks to him. And then he started just telling himself, like watching himself and being like, dude, get in the back seat. You should really get in the back seat right now. And then he did. So he kind of gave himself this message from the future, right? Again, this is what happens in Interstellar, that he gives himself a message from the future, because time is potentially like an extra dimension that we can't quite perceive properly, right? The same way the first dimension can't perceive the second, and so on. If we are to talk about future humans, that this might be us from the future, maybe we should start paying attention to this. Like, think about that. If we are able to send messages to ourselves from the future, that we're seeing in Interstellar what happens when you don't listen to those messages, or what would have happened in Chris's case had he not have listened to that feeling and that gut message, maybe we should start paying attention to this and what this says, and we should start paying attention to the things that the whistleblower in Area 52's podcast is talking about. Because it seems like these are messages coming through people, because that's who they're coming from, just like in Chris's instance, but they're coming from us in the future, and they're trying to warn us about something. And I think we can all agree that it feels like we are coming towards some kind of boiling point, like a tipping point, where it feels like things are so chaotic in the world that we can't really continue to go down this road for much longer until something is going to give. And it feels like whatever that thing is going to be catastrophic. And we don't want that, obviously. So maybe instead of trying to solve problems with more war and more conflict and more finger pointing, maybe we should start trying to pay attention to these messages. Jane says, hold tight to your marbles. We live in interesting times that challenge your perception. Exactly. I think we need to start thinking outside the box a little bit, and opening up to the ideas that we do not understand time, that time might be a higher dimension, and that dimension may be able to interact with us, and then it might be happening, but we cannot perceive it the same way we perceive this dimension. But that doesn't mean it's not happening. And we may never be able to perceive it, right? Well, I mean, if that is the case, we will never be able to perceive it the way we perceive this drink bottle, right? It's not going to be hard and solid and we're not able to visualize it. It could be something that comes through our minds, because I think we all agree that our mind is extremely powerful and that we don't quite understand its full ability. Again, what is the placebo effect? Why does belief in something seem to kind of manifest it in our reality? Rambro gifted a membership. I'm sorry if I missed that one, Rambro. My brother, thank you for supporting as always. Merry Christmas. Toxic Part says Spielberg is either in the group or in the loop. Big agree. Anne McPherson, celebrating 3 months, says it's getting weirder and weirder. Thank you very much, Anne, and I absolutely agree. Merry Christmas to you. Sailor Boy Troy says, Josh, I did a short on this, explains the Atlas connection and Pleiades, 100%. Thank you, my man. Thank you very much. He also says Pleiades are said to be beings of light or light-skinned ones, Nordics. But the movie Cocoon makes more sense. Beings of light, natives confirm. We'll have to add Cocoon to the movie list in Discord. Thank you very much, brother. Zapparoo says, hi, Josh. Jacques Vallée, J. Allen Hynek, who was in the movie, were very involved with Spielberg in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, all with the support of CIA. Interesting. Very, very interesting. I think it's no doubt. And look, let's not forget, we've talked about Close Encounters and E.T. There are many other movies that Spielberg has done that kind of touch on the fact that it seems like he knows things. I think Poltergeist is one, but there are more. But I just can't think of them off the top of my head. Matt Disney, celebrating 4 months, says, Merry Christmas, you weird, filthy animals. Check out what I posted sent on the Blue Planet Project. Thank you very much, Matt. Merry Christmas to you too, brother. And Sailor's Boy Troy says, childhood end, most likely scenario, bet. I haven't seen that one either. I'm lacking, but I will say we are making up great ground with my movie knowledge in the Discord. We are pumping out these movies. And I guess while we're here and saying that, we will probably watch a movie tonight. That will be our next in the Harry Potter marathon. Prisoner of Azkaban is up tonight. But we still have one more clip. Oh, sorry, we've got 2 more clips, actually. Let's get rid of this. And we're going to jump to... So we're going to move a little bit more to just kind of like the Gen Pop circuit and just hearing people talk about this kind of stuff. Now, this one's a little bit more fun. Nothing too serious. And I just thought it was kind of interesting. So this is Christina Pazsitzky. And she is Tom Segura's wife, who is a comedian. They do a podcast together. And hopefully we can...
Yeah. See,
I just thought this was interesting because it gets more interesting the deeper it goes. Okay, sorry. I'm going to have to unmute this as it loads.
So I can talk about, all day.
Are they fart
Talk
related?
about UFOs? Yeah.
Yeah, you really like
farts.
UFOs.
I love the UFO topic.
You've really been taken by UAPs.
You know what? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the age of disclosure, too.
I know. Are you going to watch that doc?
Yeah, but I already know it's bullshit. It's propaganda.
Yeah.
She's
Man's
indeed.
trying to spread disinformation. I know what's really happening here. Okay.
She's
Interdimensional beings.
Yep.
Connected to our consciousness, trying to raise us, elevate us. It's not nefarious.
Okay. All right. There she is.
There's topics I can talk about.
So like when that clip started, I was just kind of like, oh yeah, more normies just kind of becoming aware of the topic. It's kind of seeping out into the wider podcast circuit. That's cool. But then as that clip keeps playing, I'm just like, she's in deep. She gets it. She understands that the majority of this shit is a psyop to control your perception, and that this is likely something interdimensional that is playing out through people. It's playing out through people, not on people. She gets it. Shout out to Christina Pazsitzky. Both of these guys are hilarious, actually. This podcast is a bit more like, I guess, comedy-based. Tom Segura is a comedian. Both of these guys are hilarious, so shout out to them. But the last clip that I actually wanted to wrap the show up with...
Third thing, my prediction is
is not you, Jeff. You've had your time. Thank you. Exit stage left. Is a clip... This is actually a bit of a creator shout-out. Actually, good friend of mine who has been on the show many times, Reese Dalton Morgan, the TheUFozzie. We cover him a lot. Actually, and look, just... Reese actually messaged me last night and said that he was on Bondi Beach like half an hour before the shooting actually happened yesterday, and that he walked over the bridge that it happened on. Absolutely insane. So big love to Reese. I'm glad he's safe and glad he's okay. But man, that's, crazy, crazy, crazy. This is a video that he just put out. Now, it's a short video, and this is Reese talking about his personal experience. Now, I'm not going to play the whole thing, just a small part. But Reese told me this a long time ago. And as soon as he told me, I was like, bro, you need to talk about this. You need to tell people. And understandably, he was hesitant because, it's a wild story. It's something that a lot of people, as he says in this story, would give you shit for, would just, think you're a lunatic or whatever. But Reese stepped up to the plate and told his story. And I think it's going to probably resonate with a lot of people on many levels and hopefully make more people feel comfortable to come forward with their story. So I wanted to share a small part of this. But he actually goes into more detail in the full video as to, again, synchronicities that happened later in his life that validated that there could be something to what this is actually all about. So here we go, Reese Dalton Morgan.
I attended a primary school called McLaren Vale when I was young. And when I was 9 or 10 years old, I was in music class. I was sitting in a circle and the teacher was standing in the middle holding a triangle, an instrument, and she was teaching the kids how to play it. Now, we were just sitting there with our legs crossed, listening intently, or playing a muck, as you do. And the girl next to me on my left, her name was Adeline. And she, all of a sudden, leaned over and started intensely looking at the bottom of my right shoe, which was tucked under my left knee. And she said, out of nowhere, "Oh my God, you stepped on a fairy." Now, to say I was shocked and confused was an understatement. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I could see by how intensely that she was looking at my foot that something was there. So I leaned in to have a look at my right shoe, and as best as I can describe, in the crease line or groove on the sole of my shoe, so on the bottom of my shoe in the groove line, there was an all gold humanoid with wings. Now, as I can probably imagine, people are probably saying, yeah, it was probably an insect, it was probably a figurine or a pin. This was the realest thing that I've ever seen to this day. It was so detailed and so organic that I could see the wrinkles in its eyelids. Now, this thing was hairless, it had a humanoid face, it had hands, fingers, toes. It had no sexual body parts, so no breasts or reproductive organs. And the wings were almost like a dragonfly, but in an X pattern. But because of the groove of the shoe, they had been folded back across one another. This shocked me so much when I was looking at it that I almost felt like I was in a trance staring at it, that I took my shoe off and continued to stare at this as close as I could. It was like this close to my face at that point. And looking at this thing, it was obvious that whatever this was, this all flat gold humanoid, it was dead. And the reason that I could tell that is a few months before this incident had occurred, I had found my cat dead on our veranda. It had been bitten by a snake, and it was my first time as a child experiencing death. And when I was looking at this thing, this being thing on my shoe, it gave me the same somber feeling that whatever had made it alive at one point was now gone. It had left. And this feeling just sort of washed over me. It completely kind of, overwhelmed me in a sense. And time sort of almost seemed to kind of go out the window a little bit. I'm not really sure how long went by, but I had been staring at this thing for a fair few minutes with Adeline as well, and was digging my finger in to try and get it out. And all of a sudden, the school bell rang. It was recess, and the teacher that had been teaching the class, the students started to go out and run out of the classroom, and I was still sitting there in a trance almost looking at this thing, and Adeline actually got up to leave as well. And the teacher said, "Reese, put your shoe on, I have to lock the door, let's go." And I kind of snapped out of it and came to and was like, "Oh, miss, there's a fairy on my shoe." And she looked at me like I was a complete bloody idiot, but I went to go almost show her that this thing was actually there. So I held up my shoe and say, "Miss, seriously, look, there's actually a fairy on my shoe." And I don't even know if she even looked at my shoe. I can't really recall, but she looked at me and said, "Reese, I have to lock the door. Put your shoe on. Let's go. Come on." So almost frustrated, I sort of put my shoe on. I was so paranoid about this thing falling out of my shoe in between me and getting outside to where I could take my shoe off again, that I actually hopped to the door. And when I hopped, I was still afraid that this thing would fall out. And I got outside the classroom, which was almost like a portable classroom. There was just a few steps down to the concrete pavement there. But I sat on the top step once I got outside, and I pulled my foot back up to have a look, and this thing was gone.
So, like, guys, like I said, this is Reese Dalton Morgan. His channel is linked below. You should, and that's not the full video. Okay, so the story continues. There is some synchronicities that happen later in his life that he goes into that kind of connects back to this fairy. And you know, if you don't know who this guy is, let me just like be clear on the fact that Reese is very much based in like fact. Okay, he's a researcher. He's not like I'm far more prone to go off on like tangents about wild shit that may actually have no basis in reality. Okay, that's what I do. That is not what this guy does. Okay, and I respect him deeply for that. He says at the end of his video that he's not even trying to claim that he stepped on a fairy. Like, that's not what he's trying to say. He's just recounting what he experienced. And because he has researched the phenomenon a lot, and he understands very much so how much it can manipulate your perception, and that, you know, what you see and feel may not even be what the person next to you can see and feel, or it could be like manipulating you from, again, another dimension, that you're almost having an individual experience with the phenomenon. But also, as he said, you know, the girl that was sitting next to him in his class saw it too, and she was the first one to see it, actually. So, guys, if you want to go check out the rest of that, go check out Reese's channel. Go show him some love, because, yeah, like I said, super interesting guy, and not someone to just, you know, make shit up for no reason. And, you know, someone mentioned Jacques Vallée a little bit earlier. This is kind of what he talks about in, you know, that's kind of like the idea of Passport to Magonia, is that the phenomenon has shown up using various masks over time, depending on like the cultural sort of understanding or belief system at the time, to just kind of fit in and become digestible for the people of that era and whatever their sort of belief system is. So, you know, fairies aren't necessarily even a foreign concept to the topic of the phenomenon. I don't want to miss that one. I think I want to miss this super chat. His channel is linked below, Trey. TheUFozzie. He's done an interview with Ross Coulthard, Bill Chalker. He's got some great videos up on there. Twigbird says, "Merry Christmas, Josh from Queensland, Australia. Enjoy Bali and a few bintangs." Brother, thank you very much. I will absolutely be enjoying a few bintangs. And same to you. Merry Christmas to you and your family. And I hope you have a great little holiday break. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the show today. It was a lot of fun. I do love these ones where we kind of weave in a bunch of different clips and we kind of bounce around. We're probably going to return to a few more whistleblowers this week. I'm looking forward to that. And what else we got coming up? Got a video on Area 52 that we're going to do, maybe even touching on a little bit of MH370 this week. And the live streams will be coming as normal. But I appreciate all of you for hanging out today. Everyone in Australia, much love to you guys. Let's stay together. Don't be divided. This is not the time for that. And remember that love conquers all, 100%. Everyone else, stay safe, get outside, touch some grass, be good, be kind, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.
Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on?
No matter how far you go into the dark, when you flip, you go exactly the same place to the light in our galaxy. Everything. Because everything is in balance. Everything is a polarity.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is.